Our passage today happens to be told by all four gospel writers. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all tell this particular story about Jesus. And this is important because outside of the story of Jesus' death and resurrection, this is the only story that all four gospel writers tell. If you think about it, Matthew and Luke tell us about the famous Sermon on the Mount, but John tells us about the wedding at Cana. Only John has for God so loved the world that he gave his only son, but Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell us the story of the parable of the mustard seed. So scholars tell us that this is our hint about how important, how well known this particular story was about Jesus. And we're going to read today, John's our storyteller. We're going to read in John chapter 6, and I invite you to read along with me. After this, Jesus went to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, also called the Sea of Tiberias. A large crowd kept following him because they saw the signs that he was doing for the sick. And Jesus went up the mountain and sat down there with his disciples. Now the Passover, the festival of the Jews, was near. And when he looked up and saw a large crowd coming towards him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread for these people to eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was a great deal of grass in the place, so they sat down, about 5,000 in all. Then Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they were satisfied, he told his disciples, "Gather up the fragments left over, so that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. They filled 12 baskets. So in the 1930s, on the northwest side of the Sea of Galilee, excavations were done by a group of Germans. I know this sounds like the very start of an Indiana Jones movie, and you're right. It was a German Catholic-funded group, and they were digging in the rubble and the dirt on this northwest shore of the Sea of Galilee, and in it they found the remains of a church. This church happened to have been built in the year 350. Now it would be destroyed and abandoned in the year 614 by the Persians, but in their excavations they found the outline of this ancient church, and they found parts of the walls and also beautiful mosaic floors. And right in the center, at the heart of what you would consider the altar of the church, they found this particular mosaic image of 2 fish and bread basket. Now, I learned in seminary that the miracles in the Gospels are always meant to tell us something about the nature of Jesus. They're supposed to reveal something about who Jesus is. In fact, I've told you last week that the Gospel of John refers to miracles as signs. And it's even his way of showing us that Jesus is telling us something about who he is and what his ministry is about. But I happen to think that this story sure does tell us about who Jesus is, but it also happens to reveal to us something about us people, about humans. Because just imagine with me for a moment that you are Andrew or Philip, the disciples. Now, crowds are following Jesus just about everywhere he goes. We learn in John chapter 5 that he heals a man on the Sabbath. He breaks the Sabbath law. And because of that, people start grumbling that he needs to be killed, that they want him dead. And meanwhile, word and notoriety about Jesus is growing with every passing week. And this had to make the disciples nervous. They know, in fact, what happened to John the Baptist. So here's Andrew and Philip right there in the midst of all this commotion, all these crowds, all this talk. And Jesus looks at this huge crowd that's come to hear him, and he says, hey, where are we going to get enough money to feed all these people? And does Philip say, thank you for asking, Jesus. What a wonderful question. I'm happy to assist and figure out how we're going to solve this. No, he actually gets a little smart with Jesus. 6 months' wages wouldn't be enough for everyone to have a bite. In other words, you're crazy. That is impossible, Jesus. And then Andrew chimes in, which I happen to think is his own version of sarcasm here. He says, well, we got nothing. Well, we do have this kid's 5 loaves and 2 fish. It's a joke. It's nothing, not even worth mentioning, really. 5 loaves, 2 fish, practically nothing. Anyone recognize themselves in Andrew and Philip today? Maybe you're practical. Maybe you pride yourself on being realistic and getting things done. I have a certain member of my family, I won't name them, who is fond of saying, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist, which I happen to think is just a pessimist trying to make it sound a little better. Amen. We're practical people. We're realistic. Stick to what is doable. If there's anything that is frustrating, is going to a meeting where everyone talks up here about all the things they're going to do. Let's finish a meeting with a good checklist or a to-do list or some action steps. Give me the nitty-gritty. What are these 5 loaves and 2 fish among so many? Excuses. We got excuses. Let's see. It's not enough. It's useless. What we have to offer is practically nothing. The crowds are too big. What about our hunger, Jesus? What about our food? Who's going to feed our empty bellies? And here's the thing about it. You feed all these people today. Well, guess what they're doing tomorrow? They'll be right there. They'll be right there. And what are we going to do tomorrow or the day after that or the day after that? Better not to set the precedent, Jesus. You see how good I am at excuses? How about you? One disciple says, it's impossible. The other one says, look, what we have to offer is practically nothing. What if today, Jesus feeding all those hungry people is less about meeting their hunger? And don't get me wrong, that is worth paying attention to in a world where people still, sadly, don't have enough to eat. It's worth noticing. But what if he's really trying to do is to teach the disciples that even when you think you're at a dead end, God can make a way. If we just dare to offer what we have with God, it can be enough. That out of our seemingly nothing, drop in the pan offerings, God somehow makes a way. And just look what Jesus does. He takes that child's offerings of 5 loaves and 2 fish. I wonder personally if the disciples cringed as they watched Jesus bless that meager offering of food. But they follow Jesus' instructions. They begin to pass out all the food, and the baskets never run out. 12 baskets of leftovers. What a show-off this Jesus is. Leftovers. And the thing is, this is not a miracle that gives all of us non-saviors of the world a pass. Jesus used what they gave him. Jesus used what they offered to him, that little bit of nothing, and he did this amazing thing in spite of the excuses they tried to give. You know, the writer Anne Lamott says that when she begins to feel deprived or sorry for herself, she says, it's a sure sign that I need to start giving. Find some homeless mothers and hand out 10s and 20s. I know that giving is the way we can be abundant. Giving is the way we fill our own selves up. I remember at my student church in Nashville, every single year, the regional minister of the Christian churches in Tennessee took a mission trip with people to Haiti. It was actually how I first went to Haiti, was on one of those trips with him. And I was serving at a small church, Bellevue Christian, on the west side of Nashville. And the church is small, and they really stuck to themselves. They really didn't do much with any connections with other Christian churches. And I was really wanting to connect them. I really wanted somebody from our church to go on this trip so we could be more a part of the region. And so I really pushed this trip to Haiti. I said, anybody can go. We just need a volunteer. Here's the time. Here's the cost. We'd love to support you in this effort. Does anyone in the church feel called to go? Please let me know. One person, after really pushing it hard, said, here I am. Send me. Beverly, 4 foot 10 inches tall, no particular skills you could point to, never been out of the country ever in her life, 80 years old. I thought about saying, anyone else out there feel called to go to Haiti? But I knew better. But I did have a conversation with Beverly. I said, I've been there. Even where you're staying, there's the electricity spotty. You're not going to have hot water. There's definitely no air conditioning. They keep moving at a big pace. You got to go and do. You're probably going to need to get some shots. You definitely don't want to visit a hospital there. And she said, I'm fine, I got this. And she went, and she had an absolutely amazing time. In fact, I will say, sadly, the sad reality is that because people of Haiti have such a short life expectancy, and I think it's probably getting shorter. I looked it up last night. It's 64 years is the average life expectancy. They were unaccustomed to seeing a beautiful woman like Beverly, a white woman with beautiful white hair. It was like the Pope had come to town at 80 years old. People wanted her to hold their babies and take pictures with her, and she loved it. She listened and she learned. But what I really noticed is when she came home. That's when I really noticed, because just different ways. First of all, she never stopped talking about Haiti. It was every prayer concern, every Sunday school class, there was a need, an awareness she wanted to share. But things like when our budget making time, and someone suggested that maybe this year we needed to cut what we were actually giving to other area communities and ministries. All it took was Beverly to remind the group that the churches in Haiti do so much more with so much less. And then the topic quietly got taken off the table. When our roof was leaking, she reminded everybody about the church she worshiped in that didn't have a roof. She was constantly thinking of things. I remember one of the things she was passionate about is she heard a band play of one of the schools that the churches had started, of course, to fill the need of no public education. And she said, this whole band is made up of people's hand-me-down instruments out of people's closets. And she said, I talked to the band teacher. They literally have lists of kids just waiting for any instrument, for any other mission group to bring a trumpet, a clarinet, or flute their way so that they can learn how to play. She was constantly noticing that the churches of Haiti were starting seminaries and nursing schools and many K through 12 education just to serve. And they didn't always have buildings. They'd start the school, and then they'd build a room when they had a little money, and they'd build another room when they had a little bit more. And the thing is, I had to laugh. I had to laugh at my own self because I got the message. I 100% saw it. Beverly went on that trip, and I was thinking, all Bellevue Christian Church has to send is Beverly. And with her testimony, with her witness to God's grace and abundance in Haiti, truly, she made Bellevue Christian Church in Nashville a more giving, a more loving, a more thriving congregation just because of her own witness. And I wonder about this church that wanted that there at their altar. I wonder about who they were all those many years ago. And I know that they would have been a very small religious minority. They would have been living in the midst of the Roman Empire and all that was happening with that. They would have been in a world of a new faith, trying to follow Jesus, when people were quite often suspect of who these Jesus followers were. But at the heart of their church, they wanted that image. They needed to remember. They wanted to remember that whatever they have to offer, Jesus makes a way. In their deepest hungers, their deepest yearnings, Jesus would not leave them empty. Even when it seems like they don't have much, God would make a way. It's gospel math, remember? It's when 5 loaves plus 2 fish equal 5,000 full bellies. It's gospel math. And God's abundance is all around us all the time. Every single time somebody dares to step out in faith. Every single time somebody dares to say, here's what I have to offer. And it might not end up looking like you planned it. It might not happen on your timeline or even how you ever imagined it. But God's abundance makes a way. So, come, all you hungry people. Come, everyone who hungers. The bread of life is for you. So take a seat, offer what you have, and I promise you will not leave hungry. Amen.